What's up, guys? This is Carter Thomas with Coin Mastery TV. Make sure you go and get yourself on the email list, newsletter, get the free PDFs. Go to coinmastery.com/invest. Put in your first name and your email so we can send you a lot of good and helpful information for free. As you can see, I'm not in the regular offices. I am in Los Angeles at a conference, which I'm excited about. So we're doing a little bit of a little hotel special today after a very interesting weekend. Today, what I want to talk to you about is a little bit of what happened over the last few days as it relates to Bitcoin, as it relates to JP Morgan. I want to talk about what's happening this week, what's happening in the altcoin market, and then I want to talk about a few other interesting pieces of news and topics that I see going around and really kind of set this week up. I personally I have my eyes on a few things this week. I am not planning on buying anything as of today, as of 9:30 a.m. Pacific time on Monday, because I'm waiting for another dip, honestly. Maybe not necessarily a massive bloody dip. That'd be perfect, but I'm just waiting to see what the next big trend is. I think there's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of confirmations waiting to happen, which we can talk about, with Bitcoin and others. For anybody out there, your comments are well heard. I'm trying to make this cursor a little bit bigger. I couldn't find a program in Mac that highlights your cursor, so I'm just making it a lot bigger. Hopefully you can see that, especially people watching it on your phones. We're not going to do a lot of charting stuff today, but I will definitely try to make this easier to look at for anybody who's watching. Hey, by the way, 30,000 subscribers. So thanks for everybody for being a part of that, and really well on our way to hopefully hitting 100,000. That's the goal. That always has been the goal. So thank you guys for subscribing and for telling your friends and sharing these videos. Let's look at Bitcoin. So I have Bitcoin up on the trading view chart. We look at the 60-minute with the 1 hour Bitcoin chart. And there's a few different things that we've been talking about, right? So we had this big bull run that came up, peaked at $5,000, and then it came down, and then the obvious big skies falling, hit high 2,900s, and then it went up, came back, and now it's going up again. And the real question now is, are we going to be going straight up, or is this going to continue to be an upward run? Is this premature? What's going to happen next? And I stand by what I said last week, and what that was is that I think that this is going to spend a lot of time just figuring itself out, where we're going to see this go up and down and mostly just sideways for the most part. I mean, it might go up a little bit, it might go down a little bit. I do not see this going up or sharply down anytime soon. Now, please understand, this is one of these. This is a very difficult chart to read, so I'm not held to that. I'm just going to sit and watch. At this point, I'm just going to react to whatever the market tells me, because this is just, it happened so quickly. I think that's the big takeaway that I got from, or the big observation that I have is that I'm less worried about the pullback. I mean, I think that that's a healthy thing to do. I think that just the fact that it happened so fast, 40% in a matter of hours, really, and then to come back this quickly, that to me, especially when it took so long to get to that point, that's where a lot of the unknown comes in from my perspective. As a market, it just needs more time to fill itself out. Let's switch over to the 4 hour here. I'm going to pull this down. And if you scroll out a little bit, it just takes a while, right? And yes, it comes down really quickly. But if we want this to go up to, let's say, 10,000, and you want it sustained at 10,000, there just needs to be more buying and selling. There needs to be more market exhaustion, for lack of a better term. And that's not to say this could easily skyrocket straight to 10, but then that fill out needs to happen later on. So if it goes up really fast, it's going to come down really fast too, as seen here, and vice versa. If it goes more to the horizontal, when it goes up more, it'll stay higher. So it kind of just pick your poison in this sense, right? If it goes up fast, great, but it's going to come down later, harder, more bubbly. If we spend more time going horizontal or going down now, when it does go up, which it will go up eventually, it's going to stay up there. So it has to happen sometime. And I have no doubt that it's going to go back up to 5,000 at some point. It's just a matter of, is it going to be next week or this week, or is it going to be in a month? And that's what I'm watching. So when it comes to Bitcoin, there's a lot of different aspects to watch. What I will be looking at is whether or not this breaks through really the 41, 42 area on the daily, right? So you go down to the daily chart, you start to look at it. And this is the chart where you can really start to get some insights, because that's what's called a confirmation. And if you're interested in this kind of stuff, I'm not going to do the technicals right here, just because I think that there's probably people that are doing it better for this particular instance. There are people that are watching this more. I am personally much more, I'm going to make my money on the big market moves, right? I'm not trying to predict anything. And the people who are better at technical analysis on Twitter or on Facebook or anywhere you get your technical analysis, they're going to be better at this. If you're interested in following those people, follow me on Twitter at Carter Thomas, and then look at the people I follow. A lot of great technical traders who are following this really, really well. So a lot of my strategy, honestly, is just wait and see. And if it goes way up, great. If it goes way down, great. And I'll have a plan accordingly from that. And we'll talk about that. I'm not just, going from there. So I think that's really the interesting, or that's what's happening with Bitcoin. Right? It's a good story, but it's not an actionable story for me at this point. I guess I'm going to segue before we get into the altcoins. I want to talk quickly about what happened with JP Morgan. And I want to talk about, I tweeted about this briefly, but for anybody, if you are the 1% of people who don't know what's going on, JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, said Bitcoin's a big fraud, and the price tanked, as you saw. And then there was this site and screenshot that came out, which is a verified site. This is a real site that shows JP Morgan buying up Bitcoin at the bottom. And there was just rumors flying around everywhere. Oh, JP Morgan. What I don't think a lot of people realize is that this isn't necessarily JP Morgan, the bank, right? The institution of JP Morgan, the investment bank, or the traders on the floor of JP Morgan, were not necessarily buying Bitcoin for JP Morgan, the bank. They were buying it as a custodian on behalf of institutional investors. Meaning, let's say Mary from New York City has $10 million in investment funds, and JP Morgan buys all of her securities on her behalf, because she doesn't have an E-Trade account. She has JP Morgan who buys all her stuff. She's not going to deal with that. And so she calls up JP Morgan and says, hey, look at these Bitcoin prices. I want you to go buy me some Bitcoin. And JP Morgan goes out and buys her some security related to Bitcoin, whatever that may be, as it's related in this what's called an ETN. And so on the books, it says JP Morgan, the custodian, purchased the Bitcoin security, but it doesn't say on behalf of Mary over here in New York City. So JP Morgan didn't actually buy it. They just facilitated the trade. And the reason why this is important is that whenever you see news like this, I mean, look at the last year of our lives. Look at what the impact of what fake news has become, and the power of not necessarily fake news, but just headlines, right? The headline generation, which we're all in, where we will believe something based on a headline instead of verifying it and understanding it. And that's totally fine. I mean, I do that too. Everyone does that. But in this situation, it's really important to verify these sort of things, not because of any sort of altruistic, you got to believe what you read or integrity thing, because the only thing that matters is how does this make you money, right? Okay, so JP Morgan hates on Bitcoin. Great. Let's say they even went and bought Bitcoin. Who cares if you're not going to make money on that? Like, what does it matter if they're doing it if you're not turning around and saying, okay, they're buying Bitcoin, that means I should insert the blank, right? Does that mean you should short JP Morgan stock? Does that mean you should buy JP Morgan stock? Does that mean you should buy more Bitcoin? Does that mean you should, invest in ARK because ARK is going to fintech events, conferences, and meeting with the traders of JP Morgan for beers? I'm not saying that's true. I just know they're going to a lot of fintech conferences, right? You got to take this news, verify it, understand it, and then the key, the way you make money, the way you get rich really is take this news and then turn it into an action plan. And I'm going to try to help you as much as I can with that, but there's no news here. Nothing happened as far as I can tell. That's why I wasn't I didn't do anything about it. When JP Morgan starts to buy Bitcoin, which they will because they're not idiots, and they will start to buy it at some point, then we'll talk about what to do. And like I put on Twitter, the short answer is you just don't sell your Bitcoin, because in a fixed supply market, the more you hold your Bitcoin, the more you hold anything in a fixed supply market, the less other people can have price control over it, because they have to just buy more at higher prices. And so they can't suppress the price as much if there's not as much supply to purchase. So I thought I just wanted to point this out. And, I don't think anybody did anything wrong, but we're going to see more and more and more of this. And the media feeds on this cycle. And the reason why this matters to you is because if you are not aware of who is getting the short end of the stick on these news cycles, it's often the consumer. It's often people like us. Like, we often get screwed by stuff like this because there are people who are manipulating the media and the messaging that we all see. And if we don't take the time to verify and strategize about it, a lot of market movements are going to happen that we get caught up in. So I just want to point that out because it is a big deal. And this is not the last time we're going to see this kind of thing. Let's pop open Bittrex. There was a lot of really interesting activity over the weekend. As you guys know, I try to keep it pretty unplugged on the weekends so that I can go full out Monday through Friday. But obviously, how am I not going to check the charts? Like, that's insane. So a couple things that I saw. The first is Edgeless. If you guys don't know Edgeless, it is an online casino. They've actually done a really terrific job. It's first Ethereum-based casino. And I'm going to talk about this more as these markets unfold. But one of the businesses I built, and I kind of sold that one, but it was more like it got rolled into a different company. But I built a bunch of apps, iPhone apps, iPad apps, and I was one of 9 developers that partnered with a company in San Francisco that got a real money gambling license to publish those games in the United Kingdom, because you can't do real money gambling in the United States. But we got a license, or I got teamed up with a company that got a license to do real money gambling. So it was like me and Big Fish Gaming, which is like $1 billion company. I mean, I was the only small kind of indie developer. And I learned so much about the real money gambling space. I also worked with a guy who built a Satoshi Dice site back in the day, almost bought it from him. And I learned a lot about the online casino business. And many of you, actually, I think there's actually a pretty good contingency of people who play poker in the crypto world, which is awesome because I think there's a lot of parallels, who know about this real money gambling and poker space. Here's what I'll tell you. So a company like Edgeless, this is a really good example, and you're going to see more of these. I can't remember exactly which ones there are, but there are more of these online casinos that are coming out, that are already out, that they have been moving through the cycles. These companies can have amazing products. They can have amazing teams. They can have amazing partnerships. They can even be fully compliant in whatever U.S. or like any regulatory environment, meaning they can get approved in not only Costa Rica, but in Mexico and Canada and maybe even Australia or the United States at some point. Like they can get everything dialed in. Great. Casinos and online gambling sites are the most ruthless and relentless marketing business I've ever seen in my life. Meaning, to get new customers to come in and become real money paying customers in your casino game is an unbelievable business. And I learned that from being a part of it. I've seen that in the affiliate world. I've met plenty of people that do this in the affiliate world, and it's crazy. And that to me is a huge red flag for online casinos, because we're talking like $400 or $500 a person to a customer. That's how much these casinos will pay to get a customer to go and deposit $100 and spin the wheel 5 times or whatever. I want to bring that up because this is information that I have, this is experience that I have. And as I look at the charts, I look at these online casinos and I know things that a lot of people might not know. And I want to share that with you guys because there is always more to the story. These are businesses. These aren't just formulas where there's a checkbox. Oh, it's got a team, it's got a nice website, it's got a white paper. You got to go through the real business plan. Who's the competitors? What's their cost per acquisition? What's their marketing strategy? What's their operation strategy? The whole gamut of everything. And casinos are just a very, very, very competitive space. I have nothing bad to say about something like Edgeless. In fact, Edgeless is very impressive with what they've done. But when you look at the 5-year window, the 5-year horizon, and that's the horizon you got to look at if you want to make a ton of money, realize that there are deep, deep institutional threats to this business model. Because you go to a place like Las Vegas, 10 people own that entire industry, and they have no interest in letting people come and take money from them. Like, that is the last thing they do. So that's one example. I just wanted to bring that up because that's something I have a lot of experience with. And I think that as you look at some of these businesses, it's important to look at the existing business world that they're walking into. Because just because it's on crypto, just because it's on a blockchain, doesn't mean that it will automatically beat the competitors. Like, they still have to win. They just have a unique advantage by being on a blockchain. So that was something. The other thing, I guess the big news, if I'm not missing anything really, is Ethereum. So Ethereum's got their new Metropolis hard fork. They've already released part of it over the last month or so. And today is a new testnet version, which we saw a brief spike in price. Excuse me. As I can pull up here. And, it's starting to come down a little bit. So last night it really took off. Right when I put out that poll, actually, it started to take off. And now it seems like it's coming back, but it's staying a little bit higher, not much at all. And by the end of the month, the idea that this hard fork will be done. Now, this is different than the Ethereum Classic hard fork. If anyone was around back when the DAO happened with Ethereum and Ethereum Classic hard fork, this is different, right? There's no split like Bitcoin Cash. It just means that Ethereum itself is getting revamped. And they're doing it for a few reasons. One, to help with scalability, one to help with security, and a few other things. And if you're interested, you should go read up on it because it's more technical than that. But the big thing, in my opinion, is not necessarily the Ethereum impact, because I think Ethereum is a great technology. It'll continue to do well. The big deal is that they are making a huge push towards allowing or making Ethereum transactions more anonymous. And they're going to do that, allegedly, by implementing what's called the ZK Snarks technology. That technology was pioneered by Zcash. And so Zcash, if all goes according to plan, will be used. That technology will be used in the new Ethereum Metropolis to help make transactions more anonymous, more private. So one of the coins that I'm looking at this week is Zcash. Again, I'm not going to buy it yet, but the more research I do, the more I may be inclined to pick it up, or at least buy a couple of them, because that is a good, that's a solid thesis to buy on, aside from just price. Right now, the problem is whenever you buy on something that's not technically based, that information that I have, that you have, that everyone has, that Zcash is going to work with Ethereum, that's not competitive. That's not a competitive advantage to me, right? If I know it and everyone else can read the same article and know it, that's typically already baked into the price in some way. Now, if there's some big breaking piece of news that happens that may change the price, that's a different story. But what I'm going to be looking for is how can I figure out, or how can I find information, both by talking to people, by networking, by doing research, by digging deep into Bitcoin talk posts, all that, is how can I find out what the plan is way more than 90% of people who are buying Zcash would know. Because then I have a competitive advantage and I can make a better decision on, is this price low or is it high for the future. But Zcash is interesting. Truth be told, and I've talked about this before, I do not love Zcash for two reasons. One, and I don't mean to be whatever about this, curt about this, but I think the founder is a really smart guy. I think he's a little bit of a loose cannon, to be perfectly honest, but I think that he has done a great thing. The other piece is that Zcash is it's so private that you do not know how many coins there are. You don't know how many what the transaction sizes are. So when you look at the blockchain, you have no idea how big the transactions are, and there's no ledger that will verify the number of coins. Meaning, theoretically, somebody could be printing millions and millions of Z coins, or Zcash, I should say, and there's very little way to verify it. At least that's the understanding I've had from all my research. And please let me know if I'm missing something there. But that is a little sketchy to me. There's also a huge pre-mine, which that's a different story. Now on the flip side of that, that's why I also like Zcoin, which I talked about a couple weeks ago. And that's one of the big reasons why I like it, is because they are also building a Ethereum Metropolis solution, but they obviously have a great team, which I believe in, and they have more transparency into their ZK Snark technology so that you can see how many coins there are. There's no anonymity. I'm not trying to, do your own research. I'm not saying you should go buy it, but I'm looking at Zcash and at Zcoin this week. I already own a bunch of Zcoin. I do not own any Zcash. But these are two I'm going to look at, because this would be something that benefits from the fork on top of just the Ethereum itself. All right. Last thing I want to talk about, I think that's the last thing. Yeah, this is just an article about the fork. Last thing I want to mention, which I thought would be kind of interesting, is you guys may have seen this, you may not have seen this. First of all, I do not condone pirating software or pirating movies, whatever. Do what you want to do. That's not my thing. I don't recommend anybody doing it. But there's a site called the Pirate Bay, which is a big torrent site, which typically pirate stuff through torrenting. And they had been running a JavaScript which would take your GPU processing power from your computer while you're browsing on that site and leverage it into mining Monero. Monero aside, right? The fact that I like Monero, put that aside. But this is a really wild thing to think about. And I definitely don't agree with the fact that they're doing this without people's knowledge. I think that that's sketchy. But the idea of democratizing mining power is a really interesting trend that I'm starting to see. A lot of these privacy coins specifically, but a lot of coins in general, are starting to produce code that will allow for everybody to start mining coins or contributing to mining pools with their computer, with their phones, with, very, very small GPU powers relative to mining rigs, but that could create a much bigger mining operation. And I think that companies like Golem are trying to do that from a CPU standpoint to actually just create CPU power for running programs and stuff. But from a mining standpoint, that's really interesting. And you see companies like Brave browser, right? So their basic attention token, which is actually doing pretty well. You guys go check it out. BAT, B-A-T. They had a couple of breakouts this weekend, which has been interesting. I want to start using their browser. But those guys, and then Steam is kind of doing this where they're really trying to stabilize the advertising. Maybe not destabilize, but not even decentralize. Disrupt, I guess is the right word. Where instead of showing ads, it's just your computer and your browsing time that can create the value for the revenue model. And instead of having to click on ads or whatever, you are just contributing. The value comes from owning the hardware as opposed to your attention and your marketing information or whatever it may be. That's a really interesting way to look at crypto. And I am personally very, very fascinated with that business model. One of the companies that I own a bunch of is Aeon, which truth be told, I would not recommend people buy Aeon because it's in very, very, very early beta. So there's much better investments to make short term. But one of their theses is turn phones into mini Monero miners. And they were one of the first people to do this. You're going to see this happen more and more. In fact, Monero's new hard fork is allowing this to happen as well. I think that is a very compelling use case and selling proposition for people to use and download wallets and use coins. And while I don't agree with what these guys did with the Pirate Bay, I do think that the more we can find ways for people to contribute to a value pool without having to dedicate time or energy or buy money, or people who can just passively contribute without knowing anything, that to me is very compelling. And I'm going to keep my eye on those kind of, not only this kind of activity, but I'm going to take a look at the coins that are trying to do that. Monero's trying to do that. I think that the Brave browser, I don't know if they're doing that yet, but they're kind of on that path. Golem's kind of doing that, even though Golem has just been the biggest bane of my trading existence. But, so it goes. This is an interesting trend. This is something that I'm super interested in because this is something I could give to any person in the United States or in the world. And I could say, hey, take your phone and download this wallet and then use this browser and you will make money. And that is something that I don't care who you are, what your education level is, you would be interested in. And that's powerful. That's a way for mass adoption to happen. Cool. All right. So as mentioned, go on Twitter, follow me on Twitter. That's where I kind of talk more about the weekly stuff. This week, I'm watching Bitcoin, I'm watching Ethereum, I'm watching Zcash, I'm watching Neo, and I'm watching Bitcoin Cash. Neo and Bitcoin Cash, obviously because of the China stuff, that's kind of a wait and see situation. And then with this Ethereum hard fork and with Zcash and with Zcoin, I should say, seeing if I can find something that's unique and different. But I'm really not planning on buying anything. I think the last thing I would say is I did sell on Twitter. I said, hey, I sold some of the profits because I had a fill order at 3,100. For anyone, I didn't get 3,100 Bitcoin. It was the Bitcoin that filled at the 3,100 level. I should have been more clear about that. But it went up to 38, 39. I sold a percentage of that, not a big percentage, just a little bit, as a risk mitigation. That has nothing to do with me thinking it's bullish or bearish. It's just one of those things. You got to have a little bit of cash at all times if you want to be able to sleep at night. Otherwise, you're gonna really feel the stress. And that's the only reason I did it. And this week, I have no intention of buying anything. I'm really just gonna wait and watch and see these bigger trends unfold. Because for the most part, I've got my stuff in the market anyway, so I'm not gonna miss out. But now I have a cash that I can use or tether I can use to deploy if it goes down, but I also have a lot of upside if it goes up, that's the position I always want to be in. That's a position of power, of confidence. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching, guys. Go follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/Carter Thomas. I'll be active Monday through Friday. I'm very active. And then make sure you download the podcast, coinmastery.com/iTunes or /Android. Get the audio if you ever want. I'll be back from smoggy Los Angeles tomorrow and Wednesday. So I'll see you guys later. Peace out.